Hello ladies, in this video we're going to go through, 4H. So we're looking at the midpoint of a line and the length of a line segment. Now these two topics might seem at first a little bit difficult, but the good thing is you've got a formula for each. So we have a formula for the midpoint of a line. So what it means by midpoint is just the halfway point between 2 points. So you can see here we've got a line going from 1, 5, the coordinate 1, 5, down to 4, 2. Okay, so that's just the coordinates. And then this M is your halfway point. So what you need to have in your notebook or in your bound reference is this formula here. Okay, it's extremely important that this formula goes into your bound reference because it's basically just your x coordinate plus your x coordinate divided by 2. So if you think about this one here, what we've got is your x coordinate here is 1 and 4. So we add them together, divide by 2. So your halfway point for your x coordinate is there at, sorry, that should be a straight line, at 2.5. And then the other coordinate comes from adding your y values together and dividing by 2. So we've got 5 plus 2 is 7. And then half of that is 3.5. So you can see that here. So this formula, as long as you've got your 2 points, you can find the midpoint, the halfway point between the two lines. Okay, the other thing, let me just go down. Okay, the other thing you need to know is the length of a line segment. So this is a little bit different, or not different, but just needs a little bit more explanation. I might just go down. Oh, so I've got a question there. Sorry, I thought it was more theory. So you can also find the length of a line. Now this length of a line, when you think about it, we can turn it into a triangle. So the red dotted lines there, you can see it's a triangle. So I'm just going to redraw that. Oh, it's a terrible triangle. Redraw the triangle here. Okay, and for any right angle triangle, we can find the length of this side using Pythagoras' theorem. So if you haven't heard of Pythagoras' theorem before, it's basically we take two side lengths, A and B, and we can use them to find C. So Pythagoras' theorem, and I'm just going to write on the side here, is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And then to get C by itself, if we're going to do the opposite of the square root, not square, square root square. So we take the square root of both sides. So C is equal to the square root of A squared plus B squared. So in this case, A squared is your length, okay, and B of one side, and B is your length of the other. So you need to find the length of this and the length of this. So when we're going to do the length of a line segment, what I'll do is I'll expand this formula to include those two because I can't see the formula there. So I don't think it's been given to you in your textbook, but I'll show you the formula. We just don't have enough space to write it here. Okay, so let's go on to question 1, which is the midpoint. Okay, so finding the midpoint. Now, just like when we did the gradient, it's always a good idea to identify a point as x1, y1, x2, y2, and write the formula. So until you get used to the formula, it's always a good idea to write them down. So we're going to add the 2x together and divide by 2. So we're dividing by 2 because we're finding the halfway point, and then y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So it's like finding the midpoint between any two values. Okay, we always add them together and divide it by 2. Okay, so now we're just substituting in. So x1 is 0, x2 is 2, then we divide that by 2. And remember their coordinates, so we do have to put them in brackets. And then y1 is 2, and y2 is 8. And then we just simplify that. So we've got 2 on 2 and 10 on 2. So 2 on 2 is 1, 10 on 2 is 5. And when you think about it, looking back at our points, what number is between or halfway between 0 and 2? It's 1. And what number is halfway between 2 and 8? It's 5. So basically that's all we're doing. Okay, moving on to question B, we'll do the same thing. We've got x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm not going to rewrite that formula because it's just there. So your midpoint, and it's a capital M, so don't get mixed up with the lowercase m, which is your gradient. Okay, so x1 is -1, x2 is 6, and then y1 is 5, and y2 is -1. And I'm just going to make sure I've put those values in correctly. Good. All right, so -1 plus 6 is 5. And 5 plus -1 is 4. Okay, so 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So there's your midpoint of the line. Okay, let's scroll on. All right, so find the missing, so I'm doing question 4, so it's another midpoint. So here we've got the midpoint has been given to us, and we've got the other values are missing. So when you think your midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Okay, so for the first one, your midpoint is 6, 1. And we know that we can just call this point x1, y1. So we've got 4 plus something, so it's going to be x2 divided by 2. So we don't know what x2 is because we don't have the other point. And then y1 can be 2 plus y2. We don't know what that is. That's what we've got to find out, divided by 2. Now, this is where you've got to think, all right, this is our x coordinate, and that has come from that. Sorry about my circle. So basically 4 plus x on 2 divided by 2 is equal to 6. So what number, when you add it to 4 and divide by 2, will give you 6? So you can solve that algebraically. So if we just multiply both sides by 2, so we've got 4 plus x squared is equal to 12. And then we subtract 4 from both sides. Okay, so we've got x2 is 8, so I'm going to put that in here. So we found the x coordinate of that point. All right, and I'm going to scroll down because we need a little bit more room. And let me just change the color so we know where we're working from. So now I know that we're doing 1. So 2 plus y2 over 2 is equal to 1. So I'm now again going to solve for y2. So times both sides by 2, so that disappears. So I've got 2 plus y2 is equal to 2. And then subtract 2 from both sides. So y2 is equal to 0. So if I just go back up to my table and put 0, and then you can kind of think about it before you move on to the next one. So what number is halfway between 4 and 6? So 4 plus 8 is 12. Sorry, let me just start again. What number is halfway between 4 and 8? Okay, so we add them together. 4 plus 8 is 12, divided by 2 gives you 6. Awesome. And then the second point, 2 plus 0 divided by 2 gives you 1. So you can test out your final answer if you wanted to. Now, just because I don't have much space, I'm not going to do the other 2 points, but you kind of get the idea. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So I chose question 5 because I thought it might be a little bit obscure for some people. So a circle has a center 2, 1. Find the coordinates of the endpoint of a diameter if the other endpoint has these coordinates. So if I just draw the circle, another great drawing by me. Okay, so here's our center, which is at 2, 1. And the other endpoint for A is 7, 1. Okay, so here is 7, 1. So if you think about it, a set of coordinates, and here's 1, and here's 2, and then maybe down a little bit further is 7. So your center of your circle is, sorry, let me just get rid of that. So your circle kind of goes, it's not good, a good drawing, but you can see there's your center, and then you've got an end point here. So that's basically what I've drawn. So if you can kind of imagine an axis there. Now, what we have to do now, say, all right, well, what is our radius? Okay, so if I'm just going from here to here, what is the difference in my x values? So what did I went from 2 to 7? So that means my radius is 5. Okay, so it doesn't matter about that y coordinate. Okay, we're just looking at that x coordinate. So it's basically, what is the distance of this line? It's 5. So that means because it's the radius and it's a circle, it's going to be the same on the other side. So what are we doing? The coordinates of the endpoint. So here, obviously it's going to still be, the y coordinate is going to be 1, but the x coordinate is just going to be 2 minus 5, which is -3. And you could do that using the midpoint formula, but I think seeing it visually is probably a little bit better, a bit better in understanding what is actually happening. All right, so that was question A. All right, I don't know if there was a little glitch, but I had to erase question B because I was actually doing the wrong thing. I was doing the length of the line and not the midpoint. So let's now continue. I don't know whether you're actually aware of anything that goes on behind the scenes, but just in case there was a small glitch, that was because I had to erase what I did for question B and start again. Okay, so for question B, what I'm going to do, in question A, I showed you visually. For question B, I'm going to use the midpoint formula. So similar to what we did for the question 3 or question 4? Question 4, I think it was. Okay, so the midpoint formula is this. So I'll quickly write it down. Oops. This is me rushing. That should be a 2. That should be a plus sign. Okay, so we have this point here, 2, 1. Okay, so we can call that x1, y1. And here's our midpoint. So similar to before. Oh, sorry, no. That's not our midpoint. Erase. I'm rushing, all these things are happening. This is our midpoint here. Okay, so let me just write that. Okay, because that's the center of the circle. This is x1, y1. I should really give myself a break because I'm making mistakes. Okay, 3 plus x2 over 2, and then 6 plus y2 over 2. Now, oh gosh, got to stop doing that. Okay, there we go. So just like we did before, this is our x coordinate of the midpoint, and this is how we get that x coordinate. So we're basically now just solving for x2. And then the 1 is your midpoint, or the y coordinate of the midpoint, which is found using 6 plus y2 over 2 equals 1. So we're going to solve both of them and it'll give us the other point. Okay, so let's multiply both sides by 2. So I'm going to do the x coordinate first. Okay, so x2 is equal to 1. And then our other point, multiply both sides by 2, so that disappears. 6 plus y2 is equal to 2. So y2 equals negative 4. So your endpoint of the other point is 1, negative 4. So for this question, I showed you both visually, and then for question B, I showed you using the midpoint formula. Okay, I'm going to just do one more question because I realized that I didn't have a line segment question, so I've just added that in, but you probably have no idea that I didn't originally have it. Now, when I was going through the theory, I said there's a formula for the length of a line segment. So here it is here. We're using Pythagoras' theorem. Okay, so don't worry too much if you haven't seen that before. As long as you can identify points as x2, y1, y2, y1, you'll be fine. And don't forget to square. So the biggest mistake students make is they don't copy things correctly. So let's look at question A first. So we've got 1, 1, and the other point is 2, 6. So label them. Now it doesn't matter which one you call x1 and y1 and x2, y2. The formula will still work. Okay, so we're going to substitute in, first of all, x2, which is 2, and then x1. And then we're going to put in y2, which is 6, and then y1, which is 1. And don't forget to take the square root. So I usually do the square root at the end, just because otherwise it gets a bit messy. And I'm just going to write L equals, so the length of the line equals. All right, 2 minus 1 is 1. 6 minus 1 is 5. Okay, so 5 squared, 1 squared. And the length is 1 plus 5, which is 25. So square root of 26. Okay, and I think it said to 2 decimal places. So I'll just quickly do that on my calculator. When I say calculator, I say phone. So let me just see if I can get this working. Oh, it's so frustrating. All right, if it's not going to work this time, yes, it is. Good. Okay, 26 square root. Okay, so we've got 5.099, so it's going to be 5.10, so 2 decimal places. All right, so the next question. Let me just scroll. So maybe pause and give yourself a go. So I'll write it down here. So I might not do C, but I'll do B as well. So it was easy to remember their coordinates. Okay, so we're going to substitute it into the formula. So I'm going to write the formula again. Okay, so label them x1, y1, x2, y2. So we've got 3 minus 1 squared, and then 4 minus 2 squared. Okay, so 3 minus 1 is 2. We've got 2 squared. 4 minus 2 is also 2. And then we're taking the square root of that. So we've got 4 plus 4 is 8. So the square root of 8, I'm going to do it on my calculator again. So it's 2.83, 2 decimal places. Okay, so just substituting those values into the formula. All right, bye girls. Okay, let's do B as well.